The Anarchist perk deck. The perk deck that came out with the Sydney character pack. As with all of the other perk decks, helmet popping, blending in, walking closet, fast and furious, these are all shared, so we will not be going over those. However, we will be taking a look at what it has to offer otherwise. Blitzkrieg Bop. Instead of fully regenerating armor when out of combat, the Anarchist will continuously regenerate armor throughout the entire combat. Heavier armor regenerates more armor, but during longer intervals. Straight Edge. 50% of your health is converted into 100% armor. Death or Glory. 50% of your health is converted into 110% armor. Rise Above. 50% of your health is converted into 120% armor. And Lust for Life. Dealing damage will grant you 10 armor. This can only occur once every 1.5 seconds. So, at first, this perk deck may be a little confusing. Basically, it's saying that you won't regenerate armor as you normally would. Instead, armor regeneration is based on dealing damage to enemies. And if you're not doing damage, then the rate of your armor regeneration is going to be extremely slow. So, playing with this perk deck is very interesting. Essentially, it's very similar to Grinder, but instead of getting back health, you get back armor. Also like Grinder, this perk deck gives you a nice little extra boost to your armor instead of your health. For the gameplay today, I'm going to be showing you two different setups that I used. One is an armor setup using ICTV, and another is an armor and dodge setup using the suit. Let's take a look at the differences in these setups. First, I'm going to show off the ICTV setup. Right now, I'm in the skill revamp beta, and I won't go into the skills that I'm using just yet, I'll do them in a little bit, but for now, I just want to focus on the stats of the armor that I have for these particular setups. For the ICTV, I have 430 armor and 115 health. Everything else is pretty similar to what you would see on all ICTV setups, and you'll notice that from the Anarchist perk deck, it took off half of my total health, but in exchange, what I got was a huge boost in my armor. With the armor perk deck, you can only get up to about 300 armor, whereas with this perk deck, I'm getting 430, and that's nothing to scoff at. With the suit setup, you'll see pretty much the same thing you saw in the armor setup. Half of your health is taken away and it is converted into armor, and with this suit, I have 221 armor. Now that's a lot of damn armor. So with the suit setup, I'm maximizing the amount of armor I get, just like I did with the armor setup, but I'm also maximizing on the dodge too, by using Sneaky Bastard. I have 15 dodge, which is pretty similar to the dodge that you would get if you were using something like Ex-President without Sneaky Bastard. So already we can see some very interesting things about this perk deck. It gives a major boost to your armor, regardless of the type of armor you're wearing. It works pretty well in both a suit and ICTV, and I'd actually go as far as to say that from my first impressions, this is a perk deck in which I can honestly see myself switching back and forth between the two, a suit and armor, because it works pretty well with either one. Before we go any further into the perk deck itself, I want to quickly go over my skill setup. Right now, I'm in the skill revamp beta, so things may be a little bit different outside of the beta or when the skill revamp beta goes live, but for the most part, I'm using most of the skills that haven't actually changed that much, so it won't be too confusing. In both the armor and the suit setups, I'm rocking the skill to improve your armor by 40%. In the beta, the skill is Iron Man, and if you're outside of the beta, in the old skills, it's Bulletproof. They're essentially the same, the skill just got moved around a bit. For the suit setup, of course, I have the dodge skills. So in beta, that would be the skills Evasion and Duck and Cover, and in the old skills, it would be Sprinter and Duck and Cover. Again, pretty much the same deal, just a different name to go along with it. That's the most important part of the build. The increase in the armor synergizes really well with the armor increases from Anarchist to give some crazy armor numbers. Of course, this is at the trade-off of your health, but we'll get more into that a little later. Since this is not a health regenerative perk deck, I've gone ahead and picked up Hostage Taker, the skill to let me gain health for any hostages or converted cops on the map. I've done this for both the suit and the ICTV build I made. Now, let's start off with the ICTV setup. When you saw the stats, you could see that I had 430 armor. That is a crazy high amount of armor. You'll be able to take a lot of punishment with armor like that. One of the first things I noticed with this perk deck, though, is how little health you have. You're pretty much entirely reliant on your armor for your survivability. But since you do have a lot of armor, you've got a fair bit of leeway when it comes to taking damage. You can take a lot of small arms fire, you'll even take a few shots from dozers, a sniper shot, pretty much you'll walk away unscathed. But the biggest drawback is that your armor doesn't regenerate like it normally does. This is one of the hardest things to get used to when first using this perk deck. Normally, you instinctively go hide and cover for a few seconds, and just kind of expect your armor to regenerate. With this perk deck, you'll peek right back out, and you'll just die. I've done this quite a bit because I forget that to regenerate your armor, you need to be shooting stuff and not just hiding in cover for a few seconds like normal. It's something you just have to make a mental note of for anybody that plays more instinctively. Gotta change up the old muscle memory. I guess in a sense it's a very high risk, high reward type deal. You gotta put yourself out there at all times to deal damage to gain armor back. And it's definitely not as nice and easy as Grinder, where you can just pepper people and hide and cover while you wait for your health to regenerate a whole bunch. With Anarchist, when you damage people, it only procs a little bit of armor regen, not a big old chunk, so you gotta be a lot more careful with how much damage you take, as well as a lot more proactive in dealing damage to consistently regenerate your armor. It sucks when you're in that area where you teeter between a sliver of armor left protecting you to a completely broken armor, exposing you to health damage. And once that happens, you'll die incredibly quick. This is part of the reason why I run Hostage Taker on both of the builds, because a few shots will take you down pretty fast once your health is exposed. So to try to avoid living on the edge of life and death too often, I picked up something to reliably regenerate my health back. In the skill revamp beta, dominating enemies is super easy, so there's almost no reason not to pick up Hostage Taker if you run with a perk deck that doesn't have health regeneration. Another thing to note is the Anarchist perk deck synergizes really well with the Maniac perk deck, or pretty much any other perk deck that helps boost your own armor or damage resistance. That's really just to be expected, but, I figured I have to point it out. So far I've shown gameplay using the Anarchist perk deck with the ICTV, but I haven't really talked about anything specific to the setup, and that's because, honestly, it's very straightforward. You've got a ton of armor, very little health, and despite the fact that your armor regen is reliant on damage dealt, it still more or less plays like a generic armor build. The regeneration from the perk deck is pretty substantial, so it gives you pretty good staying power in firefights, but it's not strong enough to keep you from being overwhelmed, and there's no fallback you can rely on like there is in armor with the invulnerability grace period. It's pretty reminiscent of an ex-president with bullseye build. By continuously dealing damage and getting headshots, you keep getting armor and health back on a consistent basis to the point where you can survive in the middle of a firefight. Speaking of bullseye, I forgot to mention that in both of my builds I'm also running that. Bullseye is the skill to regenerate armor upon every headshot, barring a short cooldown, and it's pretty much the last part of the Anarchist perk deck in a nutshell, so it makes sense to pick it up. Stack armor regeneration on armor regeneration. Now, this perk deck is pretty effective with an armor build, but let's talk about it in a suit. Starting now, I'll also be showing gameplay of the perk deck being used in the suit, and honestly, I was pleasantly surprised at how effective it was, to the point where I might even say that I like the suit Anarchist build better than the ICTV Anarchist build. If you recall from the armor stats, the suit has about 220 armor. That's crazy good for a suit. Normally, the suit only has like 20 armor, meaning anyone using it is pretty much a glass cannon. Of course, most people that use a suit also use the skills and perk decks that give it dodge, making it their main method of surviving. One perk deck and setup that tries to combine both is Crook. By wearing ballistic vests, you can get more armor while still having dodge, but of course the dodge won't be as good as using a suit with Rogue. It tries to get a mix of both in, but in my opinion it falls very flat, and it's probably one of the weaker setups to use. However, now with the Anarchist perk deck, it feels like a better version of Crook. A much better one. Mixing armor and dodge, you've got a harmonic mix of survivability. Since with the lower tier of armor the Anarchist regeneration works faster, it means using a suit is pretty feasible for the perk deck. Not to mention with Hostage Taker and Bullseye, I'm stacking health regeneration and even more armor regeneration for one crazy synergized setup. Honestly, I love it. You get most of the benefits of a suit with the insane speed and a nice amount of dodge while having a substantial amount of armor to fall back on. Well, actually I guess 15 dodge really isn't that much, but I've been playing pretty much mostly with ex-president since it came out for my dodge setup, so the dodge from that was pretty similar and I already had a feel for a 15 dodge setup. The best thing about dodge with the Anarchist perk deck is that it works really well with the armor regeneration. The whole spiel of Anarchist is to give you armor regen on damage dealt, so it really lends itself well towards players who stay in the fight. Of course, when you're actively fighting, you actively take damage from enemies too. But with dodge, any aversion to damage means you bring back your armor just that much faster than if you were running with an armor setup. With that, it makes your regen just that much more effective, and I find that it works really well together for your survivability. I think Anarchist is a pretty solid perk deck to use, even with a suit, and I really like that so far about the perk deck. Most perk decks obviously cater towards a certain type of playstyle, usually split between suit and armor. With the most recent perk deck additions, I feel like Overkill keeps trying to make perk decks more and more useful to both playstyles, which I quite like. I feel like the Anarchist fits that bill quite well. Unfortunately, there is something to note about the suit setup though. The success of the Anarchist suit setup unfortunately requires a lot of skills. Most notably, I need skills for dodge, the skills for increased armor absorption, the skills for health regeneration, and the skills for armor regeneration. Missing a few of those really impacts the build negatively, and it makes it much harder to run with the setup otherwise. While some setups work fine no matter what skills or perks you have, I find this synergy to be more or less a necessity for me. Kinda like how it's hard to run Ex-President without Bullseye because their synergy together is just way too damn good. I mean, I could run without some of the skills I picked up, but it would feel like I'm gimping myself. I guess it's not a big deal, but it just kinda sucks if you aren't high enough level to get all the points needed, or you've got too many people with a similar setup or something. In any case, so far, I've been enjoying the Anarchist perk deck a lot. It's a little too early for me to say whether or not it's too good or how it really stacks up against the other perk decks or whatnot, but I've been having fun playing around with it, and I'll probably give it a go from time to time in the future.